Welcome to a very exciting episode of A Fighting Chance. I'm honored to announce that we have a very exciting fighter who is now in the UFC, Angel Pacheco. Thank you so much for being here, my friend.
Thank you. Appreciate the invite.
Yeah, man. It's been so new that you've been in the UFC. Would you say that your life has already changed with the amount of attention, people hitting you up on Instagram? Like what's been the biggest change so far?
It's definitely like individuals like yourself doing like the interviews and things like that. I used to do like a couple for local, like the local people here in Minnesota. Aside from that, not too much. Like no one's, that would be a lie. I guess one person has recognized me since uh, having the
That's
fight on
cool though.
Contender
That's
Series.
cool.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty interesting. Me and my wife were just kind of like in a furniture store, oddly enough, and we're just looking at stuff because we're gonna furnish our basement pretty soon here.
Oh wow.
And he's like, "Oh my God, I'm sorry, are you Angel?" I'm like, "Yeah." And at this point, my eye was completely healed. My ear was still a little weird looking, but yeah. So he noticed me, and then he's like, "Dude, this is awesome." And yeah, kind of.
That's cool. I mean, for me, I think
We
you might
lost him.
have one of my favorite. Okay,
He just is gone.
he's
Okay,
gone.
he's back. Okay, you're
Booted,
good. You're
guys.
back.
You're good.
All right.
I was gonna say for me, I think you have one of my favorite ways of anybody going from the Contender Series to getting a contract. Because I'm a sensitive, emotional guy. I connect with people on an emotional level. That's like truly why I love the UFC. Angel, I'm actually blind, so the
Oh,
UFC
okay.
is the only sport. It's the only sport that I actually connect with on. And people are always like, "How do you watch the fights? Like, how do you take it in?" I grew up as an athlete, and I have like a jujitsu background and a kickboxing. I've done some kickboxing as well. And I understand like the technical side of it, but people are like, how are you taking it all in? But it's not even about that for me. For me, it's about like the connection of what a fighter is and connecting with them like on like I said, an individual emotional level. And yours for me, like when the clip of you crying in the back, man, and just letting it all out emotionally in that moment is why people like Sal and I love this sport. And if I'm being completely honest, it's not about the guy who's like, oh, he's the scariest, he's the hardest dude. But like for me, it's like the combination of being vulnerable and real and you being the scariest dude is what makes this sport the sport that we all love more than anything else. And not even just I don't even compare the UFC to other sports. I just compare it to life. And it's like you guys are a perfect example of human emotion and just as real as it gets, and being able to witness it from week to week on a real time is something that honestly we thank you for. And that moment was just pure and raw and beautiful, so thank you for that.
Appreciate that. Yeah, no, that was a tough moment. Obviously, at that point, I thought I had failed pretty much my life's dream of trying to compete against some of the best fighters in the world. So I was very raw, it was just me. So yeah, I appreciate that you see it that way, and not just a big crybaby.
No, the opposite of. It's because I'm also a musician and I've been in bands touring my whole life, and I understand like going for a dream and not just it's hard. It's hard to you're convincing your family for years that this is what you're made to do. You're having to that self-belief that you can it'll slip away every morning. You'll be like having to convince yourself like you're still on the right path is a tough thing when year after year and you see friends going on and getting successful lives as we think that they're supposed to look like. And I truly understand like that emotion. I get it. I feel like I've been there, and that's why like I was just excited when Sal was like, dude, I got Angel coming on. I was like, yes.
That's awesome.
So it's yeah, man, it's and then you get to go in like your past of you being in Minnesota and all these fights. I mean, it's you Dana made the right choice of signing both of you guys that night for sure, because I feel like as fans, we're definitely in for a treat of the Angel story
Yeah,
coming up soon.
no, definitely, I agree with that 100%.
So let's go back. How did this whole journey start for you?
Yeah, so ever since I was like younger, I always liked the WWF, which is obviously scripted, like the endings at least. Good athletes and things like
Yeah.
that, but I've always been into that because of my uncle Gilbert Lopez and my aunt Estela Lopez. So
Oh,
she
cool.
got me and my oldest sister into it. My dad used to watch it a lot with his uncle, but he kind of stopped watching it like around 8 years old or so because he found out, it's fake or whatever, it's
Yeah.
scripted essentially. Um, but we got into it and we loved it. Like me and my sister actually used to like wrestle, like fake, well, obviously never like power drive each other or anything, like nothing dangerous, but we'd like wrestle in the backyard and stuff like that, or in the house or whatever the case might be, because we really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Obviously, I realized I was never gonna be a, 6'6" guy that that's gonna be in the WWE, some superstar or anything like that. So when I was, I want to say 13 or 14, I can't remember, but my dad walks into the room, and at that point, I liked boxing as well. I just didn't like
Okay.
follow it as close to as I did in WWE. But he walks in the room and he throws a DVD on my bed and he says, "Hey, this is real fighting. Watch this when you're done watching that fake stuff." So
Nice.
I'm like, okay, whatever, I just kept watching whatever I was watching. I think I was watching some old pay-per-view of like the WWE, like just a recorded one or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And I throw the DVD in, I watch a couple fights, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is boring because I didn't understand or could comprehend jujitsu in any facet. Like I've never seen it, I've
Right.
never done it, I didn't know what it was. I was like, what is this doing? Like, what is this? It's just a bunch of guys laying on top of each other, like they don't know how to fight, kind of thing. That's what was going through my mind. So I think it was like the second or third fight in, and they're talking about these two lightweights are fighting. There's no world title at the time. I don't think lightweight was even like a weight class in the UFC at the time. But they were pretty much saying like these are the two top guys. I'm like, okay, I'll give this fight a try. I'm gonna do my best to not skip it, not to like fast forward or
Yeah.
anything. So then I watched this fight. It's Eve Edwards versus Josh Thompson, and they're having a good
Oh
fight
wow.
back and forth. And like they're well-rounded guys, especially even for like that time period.
Hmm.
They're both good wrestling, good jiu-jitsu, good kickboxing, and the fight ends by Eve Edwards. He takes his back, Josh's back. He like Matt returns him. Josh gets up and like breaks hands, and when he breaks hands, he throws up spinning back fist. But at that same time, Eve Edwards jumps in the air, head kicks him, and drops him, and then just punches him a couple times on the ground and gets a TKO win. I don't know what it was about that. I was like, holy smokes, I need to try this. I need to do this. I seen that fight, and right away I was like, okay, something like clicked, and I was like, wow, I need to watch the whole thing. So I watched it back from the beginning all the way through, and I'm still like
Yeah.
not able to comprehend what's going on. But then I was just like, okay, obviously these guys are doing something. I don't understand it yet, but this other stuff, like when they're standing up and striking and stuff, is super cool.
Right.
Kickboxing that is, and boxing
Yeah.
and stuff, but with small gloves, obviously. So it's like a little bit more realistic, like in reality, if you ever get in a street fight, you're not going to have gloves on. So, boxing, like regular boxing, even practice is like completely different defensively, in comparison to like
For
MMA.
for sure.
So, yeah, after that, I went to my dad's room and I was like, hey, can you teach me how to box? And then he was like, well, I'll ask your mom. My dad grew up like getting in a lot of street fights and stuff like that. He boxed a little bit,
Uh-huh.
but he knew like basics and things like that. So he was like, "Let me ask your mom," because my mom didn't want me to grow up like him, constantly fighting in the streets and being kind of a bad person, I guess. And he asked her. She said, "Yeah, if he wants to, as long as you're not forcing him to do it, you can teach him." And then he started teaching me, and from there it kind of just grew. My dad always worked. Like after that, we like after school he was always working. So then my uncle kind of like filled in the role of like helping me like do mitts and learn more things. And then from there, I started training at the Golden Gloves. I started right away my freshman year in high school. I started wrestling in high school. I wrestled for 3 years in high school at the Wilmer for as a Wilmer Cardinal. Um, I was terrible at wrestling. I was so bad at wrestling, but that's kind of expected as a freshman that's never done any sort of grappling. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I started that. My dad actually found like a Japanese jiu-jitsu school in Wilmer. I think the instructor's name was Chad Riddler, and I did their like stuff for like about a year and a half. But yeah, no, my parents are super supportive of it, and like once they seen like how serious I was about it, they did as much as they could like financially to help me, you know, from
Right.
14 on to being an adult even.
Was having those kinds of skills like, you know, in high school? I mean, not every high school kid is getting well versed in all different areas and aspects of martial arts. Like, was that like a little bit of a burden? Like, because I mean, you could obviously mess some kids up if they ever, you know, did something to piss you off or anything. Was that tough to deal with?
No, not necessarily. Like when I was in high school, I'm still a pretty friendly person. Like it's pretty hard to
You seem very friendly.
yeah, yeah. It's pretty hard to like. I have a long fuse, and like it's pretty hard to like piss me off to that extent where I want to get physical with someone. Um, the
Yeah.
only thing I could really remember in high school was like a kid that got mad at me, and I was the one actually being a jerk in the situation, kind of a bully
Mhm.
or something. I think I had his like calculator or something, and I was using it in our like ceramics class or something. And then he said he was gonna like beat my ass or something, and then I ended up pretty much like snapping him down, holding him in like a front choke, like a guillotine, but just like
Uh-huh.
a front headlock, and kind of choked him a
Yeah.
little bit. And I was like, "Are you done? Are you done?" And then he stopped, and then we were good after that. But that honestly, that was more me being a jerk. But otherwise, I never
Yeah.
had issues like that, like where I had to get physical with anyone. Um, I will say this though, like doing wrestling practice and then going straight to boxing, that was terrible. I remember my boxing coach would get on me and be like, "What are you doing? Like, why are you so out of shape?" and stuff like that. And not realizing I just literally got done with wrestling practice. My mom picked me up and drove me straight to boxing practice. So it was always like I was the most tired guy in the room, and he was just like always like, "What are you doing? Why are you always so tired?" And then once wrestling season would end, and I'd go to the last couple practices for boxing because they're around the same season, at least in or Wilmer, because they only do it like
Yeah.
seasonally, so through the winter. And then I'd be like in great shape, and he's like, "Where was this shape the whole year?" You know, it's like I've been doing wrestling practice, and wrestling was like the most grueling sport I've ever been a part of. So yeah.
That's what they say. That is what they say. Where is Wilmer in Minnesota?
Shoot, I'm terrible at like math stuff, but I'm
I,
pretty sure it's central
I
Minnesota.
okay, so okay, I went to an ice hockey camp in right out of Brainerd. Do you
Oh,
know
okay.
that
Yep, I know
area?
where Brainerd is. Yeah. Brainerd's
It was like in Hartford or Heartland, I
okay.
think
Okay.
was and I actually spent like a week in Rochester as well at the Mayo Clinic.
Oh,
That's where they
okay.
diagnosed my eye condition. But I went to. Have you ever been to Paul Bunyan Land in Brainerd?
I've never been there, but I've drove through like past it.
It might be the most interesting thing in America. Is that location? But
That my head coach is from Brainerd, Minnesota. His name is Brock Larson, and he grew up
yeah.
there and everything. So yeah, he knows all about Brainerd.
My best friend and I and my dad went to Paul Bunyan Land on one of the days off of camp, and there's just a massive Paul Bunyan as you walk in. They're just talking to you, and it's just like, where are we right now?
That sounds creepy.
It was rather creepy. That's a good way to put it. So, would you say that at 14, like right when your dad started, giving you some pointers with boxing, were you pretty like passionate about it right from the start?
I mean, if you would have thrown me in a cage at that point and like had me fighting, I have no idea how I would have reacted or anything.
But you would have done it.
I definitely would have tried it. Yeah. I mean, but most
So,
American boys think they know how to fight until they fight, and they're like realize they don't know how to fight.
y- yeah, I guess my question is like when you're doing wrestling and then going from wrestling to boxing, at that point, did you already have the goal in your mind? Like, I want to be a fighter. I want to be what I saw on TV with Eve Edwards knocking out
Oh,
Josh Thompson. Like, did you already You already had that in your mind, like as the goal.
Yes, absolutely. I knew for a fact I was fighting. Like whether it was for me or not, I
Nice.
was gonna do it and give it a try. Obviously, goals I feel like slowly become the goals, right? Like
Right.
for the most part, like growing up, I always like would say, "Oh, I want to be like in the NFL or whatever," but like
Mhm.
that's it's. My dad would always tell me like your words or your actions speak louder than your words, sort of thing. So it's like
Right.
I can
Hmm.
say that, but if I'm not running, if I'm not, catching the football, if I'm not doing this, that, uh, whatever I say can be whatever I say. But if I'm not putting in the work, it doesn't really matter, right? That was
Right.
grueling. That was really, really rough. Like those 3 years, just because wrestling's super hard, like I said, and then the boxing on top of it right after. And then whenever boxing wasn't around, the program wasn't going, I was at home training. Like I'd recruit my sisters and stuff like that to hold mitts for me and stuff. So it's like I was very serious, and I think that's maybe why my parents were so willing to help me because they've seen how dedicated I was at a younger age. And like I didn't always have coaches or like people to tell me what to do. I just took what my dad had told me and kind of ran with that and just try to find things here and there to learn. Because in Wilmer, Minnesota, there wasn't much for martial arts.
And this is all ever before having a real fight.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I was
So,
training a lot. Yeah, a lot
so
before my
what
first
did you
fight.
feel? Okay. So what happened when you got in there and had your first fight? Like, I mean, cause that could, you put your all into this. I mean, what if you got in and you're like, okay, I don't like it.
Yeah. So I had boxed before I did my first like amateur MMA fight. But
Mhm.
that was back when I was like 14, and like I said, I was overtraining at the time. Uh,
Yeah.
and I did that one fight, and then after that, I didn't fight again for a couple years. But I had that amateur boxing match, and then I had the amateur MMA fight when I was 18 or 19. Um, my first fight was actually against a kid that ended up becoming my teammate, like a year or two later. But his name was Timmy Ogundapeg. And in hindsight, I probably shouldn't have took that fight. I was probably walking around at like 152. The fight
Mhm.
originally was supposed to be at 145, and then the kid got hurt, and then I was supposed to fight at 155, and then that kid got hurt, and then the only opportunity they had for me to fight was at 170.
Oh
And
no.
at the time, my coach, uh, he was from like a smaller MMA gym here in Minnesota. It's called Damage Inc. I think he was kind of like the last of Damage Inc.'s team. And he was pretty much just like, yeah, I think you'll be all right. And like I said, in hindsight, I shouldn't have took that fight. Like me as a 31-year-old man now, if I had a kid that I was teaching and I was just like doing privates with him and he decided to fight or whatever, and I was like, yeah, let's fight. And somebody said that, like, hey, this kid walks around at 150, but you're going to fight a guy that's going to cut weight to 170. I would not allow him to fight. He's a young kid. That's pointless. Like, we can get him another fight in a couple months. It's not that big of a deal, sort of thing. Like I said, hindsight. But I was
Yeah.
so,
Risk to reward.
yeah, I was so, like, not desperate, but I was just so ready. Like, I felt like it didn't matter who I fought at that point. I just wanted to
Hmm.
get in there and do it and, fulfill, like, my destiny in my mind, like do this
For
thing that
sure.
I think I love. I really want to try it and see if I really love it and if I really enjoy it. So I ended up taking that fight. I remember at weigh-ins, I seen Brock, and at the time, I've never trained with him. I just met him that day. I was like, "Hey, where's my opponent?" And they're like, "Oh, he's out running." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And for some reason in my head, I thought like, okay, he's out running, he must be fat. Some reason that's what went through my head, and not realizing, nope, nope. So I remember at the venue, I'm looking around in the fighter meeting, I'm like, who's my opponent? And I see my opponent, not knowing it's him, and they pronounce his name Timmy, but he's a Nigerian kid, I believe, and he's just yoked, just huge. I'm like, I see him, I'm like, well, that's not my opponent. He's way too big. And I'm sitting in the back right before we walk to the cage, and he's standing in front of me. and to the left of him is Tony Martin whispering in his ear, like hyping him up. Tony Martin fought in the UFC, had like 14, 15 fights in the UFC. He's a good fighter.
Oh wow.
He was a lightweight, and then he became a welterweight. But at the time, he wasn't in the UFC. But he's whispering in his ear, probably talking trash, getting him hyped to beat me up and stuff. I'm sitting here, and he's like making hand gestures, grabbing his crotch, making faces like I'm gonna beat you up kind of thing. I look at my coach and I say, I'm gonna knock this kid out. And then I walk out there, my music's playing or whatever, and then he walks out, we start fighting. I remember he came out as a southpaw, and I remember he
Okay.
hit me. And when he hit me, all of a sudden I'm standing southpaw myself. I'm like, what the heck's going on? I cover and I start punching this kid. Obviously now I know he like rocked me, so I'm like, I ended up like turning and throwing back and stuff. Long story short, he was a better wrestler than me. He took me down, but every time we were on our feet, I was landing my right hand on him really good.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't know the ref at the time was training with him, so that's kind of a weird predicament for like the commission to allow that. I didn't, but
Yeah.
so pretty much the crowd would boo because I would hold him in my guard and punch him, and he was just hugging my hips. It was a very weird fight. I ended up losing a split decision, so that was kind of like,
Oh wow.
yeah, I was kind of like,
That's pretty good
ugh.
though.
Yeah, I was like, what the heck? I
Yeah.
actually after the fact found out like once I got to meet Timmy and kind of know him a little bit better that I detached his retina from the fight,
Oh. Oh man.
which obviously sucks because then he loses eyesight in his right eye. And then he had surgery on it, and I think he returned to the gym too soon or something, and then hurt it further, sort of thing. So that's
Oh wow.
unfortunate. But yeah, so that was my first ever amateur MMA fight. I got to meet Rich Franklin that night. He was there just as like a special guest sort of thing. But yeah, I don't regret taking if I was like in my mind now, like I'd be like, no, don't fight a guy that's that heavy, you know? I remember asking him after the
Yeah.
fight, what do you weigh when we fought? And he's like, oh, like 196. And I
Damn.
was literally walking around at 152 at the time. So it's like, oh, that was dumb of me.
That's what I'm saying. The win is that you went to decision even. Like that's pretty solid.
Yeah, it's wild. I'm surprised he didn't kill me, to be honest.
Yeah.
But
I
guess
mean,
I'm tougher
so I was looking at
most.
your yeah. Sal, what was your question about the
Yeah.
fights that you saw like
I was
a long
looking at
time
your
ago?
amateur record. Did you fight twice in one night? Because it
Yes,
shows.
I was. Yeah.
What was
Yeah.
that like?
No, I was in a tournament. It was an amateur tournament to see who was like number one contender for like a 145 belt for a local promotion here, a driller promotion. It was cool. It was interesting. I would never do it again, but it was like a very interesting thing because the first and foremost, it was very weird rules. I would maybe consider it if it was like a 3-round thing instead of just a 1-round thing. So each fight was only 1 round, which means 3 minutes
That's kinda
of a
cool.
fight. So 3 minutes of a fight against one guy, right? So my first fight, I fought Chris Cargy. I fought him, and it was a pretty good little back and forth fight. I caught him. He caught me a little bit. He got a cut on my eye or something. But then I ended up taking him down and taking his back, and then I tried to do like a little fancy armbar. It ended up not working. It looked terrible. And then I won by decision that round. The second round, I fought a kid named Alex Wiggs. And when I fought him, he just came out blasting, like crazy pace, like right away, just da-da-da, whatever. And then I ended up head kicking him in the fight, rocking him really bad, almost finishing him. And then he ends up surviving, essentially. And then they gave him a draw. So then the draw means that we had to do an extra minute in the fight. I'm like, okay, well, that's kind of weird, but okay. Yeah. So I'm thinking, well, if the takedowns after he almost got knocked out, right? So the first round he got a takedown, and then later on in the round I almost knocked him out. I was like, okay, if I get a takedown without getting hurt, I should win, right? So I ended up taking him down at the end of the round. I'm assuming off of damage or I don't know what. I didn't feel like he did too much, but whatever. I ended up taking him down in the last like of the 60-second round, and then I lost the decision because he just blitzed.
That's
Yeah, he
insane.
blitzed
That's
me,
insane
and
to
I ended up
score.
taking him down. Yeah, it's very strange. So then
Yeah.
I ended up losing that decision, and if I would have won that, I would have had one more fight to win the tournament. But Alex Wiggs ended up winning the tournament, so yeah, it was an interesting night for sure. That's very weird.
I also noticed that you had your first, or at least what this says, you had your first pro fight in 2013, and then there's a jump to 2019. Did you not compete for that amount of time, or is that just,
2013 to 2019.
or maybe they're counting it
You're
as an
saying
amateur?
my last amateur fight was 2013?
No, I'm saying like what it shows as your first pro fight says against Matthew Turek is in 2013.
Okay, that was an amateur fight. That
Oh,
was
okay, gotcha.
yeah,
So
that was
you
an
made your pro
amateur fight.
debut in 2019.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Yes. My last amateur fight was it was for LFA, I believe, or maybe it was Legacy at the time, but it was a second round TKO, I think, or something like that. Win.
Nice. So what at that point when you're getting ready to go pro, like what are, because you were mentioning goals are there earlier, is your goal at that point I want to make it to the UFC, or I just what are you looking at
Yeah.
that point?
Honestly, at that point, like once I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go pro. So I took a long time to go pro as an amateur. Part of that was because of boxing, amateur boxing. At the time, my coach, his name's Harold Hall, Harold Dwayne Hall, actually. But he's a great boxing coach. I love the guy. I still talk to him on the phone and stuff like that. He lives out in Georgia or Texas now. But he's like family to me, really. So whenever he calls, I try to answer it, even if it's like 12 o'clock at night. But the issue with that was I was getting ready for an amateur like tournament that was going to be like a 3 month tournament in a row. So 1 month you fight, 1 month you fight, 1 month you fight. And when I was getting ready for that tournament, I ended up getting my nose broken. By jiu-jitsu. We're doing jiu-jitsu, and my buddy, I had his leg and he did like a knee slide. His knee passed through and I kind of drove in and got my knee, broke my nose, literally sideways. Terrible accident. But at that point we were getting ready for the was it ringside tournament or some national tournament or ringside tournament, and he was so upset with me. He's like, Angel, like he believed in me like immensely, and he believed I could be like a world champion in boxing, like as a professional. He's like, just stop doing this MMA stuff. Stop. Like you can be good at boxing. You'll make a lot more money at boxing. And he believed in me a lot, and like I appreciated that. So like part of me was like, man, I feel bad because he's trying to take me to all these tournaments and do all these things with me, but I just broke my nose and now I'm out for X amount of time. So then after that nose break happened, he pretty much made me promise him like, hey, just give me 2 years. And if we're not, something special in 2 years, whatever. And I was like, okay, whatever. So we did 2 years. I ended up boxing, like strictly just boxing. No jiu-jitsu training at all. No kickboxing training at all. Nothing. No wrestling. None of that. So I just boxed for 2 years straight with him. I ended up getting like to the national tournament. I got to like day 3 was the furthest I ever got. I lost to a kid from New Hampshire. So pretty much what that means is like if I would have won that fight, I would have had to win. I think it was 1 or 2 more. So I had won 2 fights already, so I needed to win 3 total to be a national champion. And then from there, I would have been able to go to the Olympic qualifiers at that point. Wow. Obviously, I beat 2 tough guys. I beat New Mexico and then I beat Texas, but then I lost to New Hampshire. But boxing is a weird sport too. Like I've seen people get robbed terribly in the amateur system, and it's there's a lot of corruption and stuff like that. But not saying that I got robbed or anything. My
Right.
fight, I lost. It was a close fight. I think it could have gone either way, but it is what it is. But yeah, no. So that's why there's such a gap in between, why I had such a long amateur career. I'd say, but ultimately I realized, like, man, I I love boxing too, but that's not the career or the sport I want to put everything into. I just can't. I love MMA too much, sort of thing.
Yeah, but those 2 years of dedicated boxing is probably going to be a very, big part of your game with fighting in MMA, because not a lot of people get that.
Yeah, definitely. I think it helps. The only issue is like time, right? Like I said about the crying video and stuff like that. Dana White's not looking to sign 31-year-old athletes, you know. He's looking for guys like Danny where they're 26 and they're, good fighters. So I agree. Like, I think it helps, but at the same time, it's just like time at that point. I couldn't, in hindsight, I could probably not afford. Like, if I wouldn't have, uh, if that wouldn't have went the way it went, I would,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be in the UFC and I wouldn't have, I don't know. It's just those 2 years. I could be, I could be 29 or 28 instead of
Yeah.
31.
Well, we gotta make up some ground quick then, Angel.
Definitely, definitely. That's the plan. Once I get in, I'm trying to roll out 3 fights at least next year.
Heck yeah. Do you have one that you're already in the talks with?
No, unfortunately not. I talked to my coaches and stuff already. We're hoping early next year, so January, February, March. Um, but nothing yet. We haven't been offered anything that I know of yet. I just got done with all the Asada stuff and whatever else. So
But now they're out.
yeah, in January I guess they're out. So I don't know what's going on.
I think there's a new.
Yeah.
It's called drug-free sport or something like that. So there's gonna be testing. It's just it's a different organization.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
it's
I'm
interesting.
not sure how that all is going to work, but whatever.
So, Angel, what do you like to do outside of fighting?
Oh man, pretty much all my time goes to like my wife and my daughter at this point. I don't really
That's awesome.
follow any other sports. Like I'll play other sports, like if a bunch of buddies get together or whatever, I'll play like football or basketball or whatever. I'm terrible at them, but I'll do them. Like it's fun to do activities and things like that. I won't swim though. I can't swim for nothing. I'll die. I'll literally die if you throw me in the middle of a pool.
All right, noted.
I
That's
saw that
awesome.
you were training with Rob before this fight and with the New England cartel. How did that kind of come about?
Yeah, so last year in like November, December, I tore my meniscus. I had a bucket handle tear in my meniscus on the outside of it. When after that surgery and everything, I was pretty much cleared to start training full time. I had reached out to Rob, or not to Rob, but to my manager, Tyson, and I said, hey, I think I could give you some good looks for Yanez because he's a heavy boxer. And I think, I can show you like that pool style, he has a good jab, but he doesn't have much head movement, like things like that. And they're like, Tyson's like, yeah, let me ask Rob about it and we'll see. So he ended up talking to him, and then I guess he was all in to it. Tyson agreed, like he thought I'd be a good look for him. Ended up going out there, giving him, work. I remember first day I sparred with him, I felt bad. Like, it's like, man, like I wasn't as good a shape as like if I was like healthy, like without the knee surgery and stuff, because I got kind of chubby and stuff like that in comparison to what I normally would be if I were to just, hey, I'm here kind of thing. But no, they enjoyed the work. Rob liked it. I got to know Rob that first trip. And then a couple months later, he ended up fighting or scheduled to fight Sung Dong.
Yeah, Song Yadong.
Yeah, Song Yadong.
Sung Yadong, yep. He was going to fight him. And then he ended up getting that short notice fight with, what's his name? Corey Sandhagen. Yep. So I was helping him get prepared for Song, and by the time I got done and left, they changed up on him. So, but I also went out there for that camp. And then for my fight against Danny, I was able to go out there for the last like 3 weeks of my camp just to make sure everything's sharp and obviously roll and spar and train with all those killers that are out there. They have a lot of good fighters, whether they're in the UFC or not. They have a lot of really good fighters.
Is that a camp that you'd look at making a move to in the future or something? And, you know, like you said, they have a lot of high level guys.
Yeah. Man, New Hampshire is an expensive area to live. And I used to live in St. Cloud, and obviously not nearly as expensive or anything, but the neighborhood I was living in was pretty dangerous. There's like a lot of crime in the neighborhood I was in. I would never move back to like a big city ever. So the only way we would ever be able to move out there is if we probably moved into the city. So I don't think I'll ever move out there. I think I'll just make it kind of like a training camp thing, whether it's down the line like a 6-week thing, 8-week thing, and I have to be away from my family. I think they understand, like my wife understands the sacrifice, and obviously it's a sacrifice for her as well, because then she has Alessia all by herself, and she's working on top of it. So it's a group effort. Obviously, it's not easy.
Yeah.
I obviously missed them for those 3 weeks, so that was like super hard, and I'm sure they missed me as well. So it's just something we kind of got to suck up for now. I wish I always told Tyson when I was out there, I was like, man, Minnesota's so much cheaper to live in. Just move over here, guys. Bring them over.
The Minnesota cartel.
Tell them about Paul Bunyan land.
Yeah, Paul Bunyan.
Man, well,
Angel, I got to ask you, do you think Volk has a chance next week or this week?
I think he does, honestly. Guys like that, like, I don't think they're ever like not in the fight. The only issue with me is like he is coming off an injury, and last time he had quite a bit of time to kind of prepare for like that back control and stuff. And obviously he's like learned the skills already to kind of like avoid it, but it's not that he has to avoid it. I think he just, or not that he has to like survive in it. I think he just needs to avoid the position in general, because he can't get stuck with with Islam on his back like that. It's just too much of a time suck. And like whether Islam's hurting him or not, he's in a really good position, and if you can, all you can do is this, you're not going to win the fight. It's going to be an interesting fight, I think, just because Islam was landing a lot on him early, but I don't know. Volk figures people out. It's very interesting.
I saw a clip of him.
Yeah, if like the first round is like the fifth round, it'd be a different fight.
Yes, absolutely. That's the thing. Like, will he figure him out sooner, or will he get caught with those same shots again? And it's hard to say.
What was the clip you saw? What was the clip?
No, it was what Angel just said. Like that he was talking about how he should have pushed the pace a lot earlier. I think maybe he got a little, not starstruck, but you kind of, you're scanning the guy and you get a little stuck. But I'm excited.
Well, it's because you hear so much of what a person's capable of that you're afraid of that happening to you.
And he did mention like a strength difference,
too much respect.
Yeah, too much respect for sure. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. I know you got a lot going on with your kid and everything, and I'm glad we got you to come on. It's been super great, and we both really look forward to your career.
Yeah, Angel.
For sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, thank you for your time. Seriously, it was great to talk to you.
Yeah, no problem. Reach out anytime you guys want.
For sure. First fight, we'll reach out and make it happen.
Sounds good.
Yeah, we're fans for life of anybody who talks to us. So thank you, Angel.
Sounds good. All right, guys. You have a good night.
All right, have a great night, man.
All right, bye.
Peace.